Okay, so welcome everyone. This is a specialty evening, and this is a video call, which some of you will listen to the audio only, but this is an energy perspective on children with autism. So I am super excited. I mean, I'm excited about a lot of things in life, but this is something that's really near to my heart, and it's been a deep calling for a very long time. And what I really bring to you within this call is questions to provoke your awareness. And I'm going to share a bunch of stories with you to illustrate what's possible with these children and adults. Some of the emails that I received prior to actually showing up here with you this evening were people who were really curious about adults with Asperger's, which is not a term that's used anymore, but we still know what it means. You know, it was a thing. So, when we refer to Asperger's, it's kind of like, an adult on the autism spectrum who is a person who has social challenges, interacting socially, but probably did well in school and excelled tremendously in one area of their life or more. Usually very smart people, but the social interaction is really challenging. So we'll see, what questions actually pop up. There are some questions that were sent in from email, so I'm going to address those as well. And this is truly a live interaction with me. So I would love for those of you who are here to feel free to, ask your questions. As we sort of warm up, maybe you'll feel a little bit more comfortable jumping in and asking questions. And, I also could talk the whole time. So don't let me do that. I want to know what you're interested in. That would really make me so happy to address what you're curious about. And truly, I'm not really sure what you guys are curious about. I have had a very huge level of curiosity for a very long time, at least maybe more than 20 years or something like that. I've been so fascinated, and I have seen the evolution of these children with the label of being on the autism spectrum. I've seen them evolve from children who typically were self-abusive and flapping constantly and sort of a little bit more obvious, what was going on inside of their nervous system, to now, a lot of children who wouldn't know that they're on the spectrum. And it's because these beautiful beings are placing themselves in our world all over. And they're all around us, and they're growing in speed. And when I say in speed, I mean they're dynamically entering our worlds right now. And the ratio of people who are not, we'll call it neurotypical versus on the autism spectrum. They say that in the next 10 years it could be 1-to-1. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but it feels like when I say that. And I think it's a beautiful thing. Oftentimes, being on the autism spectrum does come with a lot of challenges. And so we'll talk about that, because I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say it's always an easy road. It's tough for the parents often, even with a lot of tools. It can be really emotional, really challenging, and, it's a ride, right? But it's also so beautiful, these beings, we're all beings, right? So I'm not saying they're like these, magical creatures, and we're not. They have capacities that we don't know. And one of the things I have found is that I have been called out from parents, people who have known me, people who've worked with me, and then people who just hear about me from word of mouth, and I go to their homes and I support them, or parents. It's like this energy of these children are like, hey, parent, reach out to Ashley and talk to her. And so then I'm like, all right, I'll come to your home, or I'll speak with you, or we'll have a call. And it's just basically, I am viewing the possibilities of these children, and I'm viewing how gifted these parents are, to be chosen. And I believe that all children choose their parents. A lot of parents, a lot of social workers, a lot of occupational therapists will say to me, I'm not really sure if I'm equipped to handle this child. And I always know in my heart that that child chose that person. Just like I know anytime I get called to a home or to work with a family, or my child makes friends with a child who, is extreme on the spectrum or something, like, I know that those children are super deliberate. I mean, don't let them fool you that they're not super capable and that they're not deliberate and know exactly what they're doing. And they're also masterful manipulators. And I say that in a heartfelt way because manipulation is such a trigger word for so many people, right? But to me, it's literally, let's just, instead of using that word manipulation, it means that they can shift energy, they can move energy, they can change things. And so, whether they do it with laying on the floor and screaming, with a tantrum, with a meltdown, with, a week of being completely unregulated, or whether they do it with, that amazing, brilliant honesty where they have no filter and they say something to someone and you didn't really want to be there, but now you gotta go. These beautiful, beautiful manipulations, these beautiful energy shifts to get the situation to change. And so my approach to speaking with you, because this is I want to speak with all of you this evening, is to really look at what's possible. And I want to look at the gift of these children. And I want to turn the conversation with, how do we fix the problem? What's the solution to the problem? I want to look at these amazing capacities they have and what are they saying with these behaviors, and the challenges that we're facing. How can we address it from a space of looking at how amazing it is and nurture it in a way that they can use those things that are perceived challenges to their benefit. I heard this thing said, and I'm not really sure how to word it differently so it's not so harsh, but it just makes so much sense to me. It's like, so many times people will look at how these children are just not getting it. They're not responding to the things, the therapies, the communication. They're just not responding. They're not getting it. And we're trying so hard and we're working so hard. But they have their own language. They have their own way of being. And they're trying so hard to fit into our world. And so someone said, so I obviously speak English, like minimal Greek, very little, but like English, right? No Chinese. If you walk up to a man who only speaks Chinese and you keep speaking to him in English and you expect him to get it and you just raise your voice and you're like, come on, like, I am telling you so clearly, how many different ways do I need to explain it to you? Who's the stupid one, right? You're not meeting them where they are. You're expecting them to learn this entire other language that's not their primary language. By the way, children on the autism spectrum, their primary language is energy. Primary, for sure. And that's, this conversation is to help all of you open up to being able to have greater awareness about their primary way of communication and to, yes, bring them into your world. So I'm not saying cut off where you are and only speak to them the way they function, because yes, they're in our world and yes, they need to, be able to do some things in society and, function in your family, or, if you're a therapist or if you're, there are a lot of things to get them to understand, how the norm is. But if we really want to get through to them, it's about learning to speak the language of energy and understanding truly that magical space that they live in and that capacity that they have that is not always acknowledged. So with that, I would really love for any of you to pipe up, and I would love to hear, specifically, what's bringing you here? Are you a parent? Are you a therapist? Are you a counselor? Are you an occupational therapist? I guess I said that kind of twice, but what's bringing you here? Are you a grandparent? Are you literally just curious? And I would love to hear. And I'm going to read the chat at the same time. So all of you, please go ahead and write to me if you can't verbally speak. So go ahead. I'm listening. Who's the brave one?
Oh, can we just say?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hi everyone, I'm Jair. I have a son, he's 2 years and 8 months old, and he has been exhibiting the symptoms of autism. Um, we so I have not taken him for an official evaluation because, and maybe we can talk about this too.
Yeah.
I'm a bit more open-minded than I feel the mainstream approach is.
Right.
And so I am a little bit concerned as to what they will want to do versus what I prefer to do. And so I am, my mother and I have been looking into the symptoms from a health perspective more so than a mental perspective. So, you know, diet is the first thing we did. We changed his diet. We removed like, you know, dairy and gluten and sugar and fried foods, etc. And his score, because we did use the ATEC, and his score came down from like 85 to 58 just by switching the diet. And so I'm very much into the whole like alternative medicine approach and dietary approach. And we're trying other, I emailed you about this, but we're trying other natural ways of just making his system, like his immune system, like be able to work properly. So from that aspect, I'm all for it. But I also don't want him to be labeled with something and have people try to push me into doing things I'm not comfortable with. So that's mainly the reason why I still have not taken him anywhere for like an official evaluation.
Okay.
And also because I want to know first, like this energetic perspective on it. Like I know that there's more to it than meets the eye.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we're here, which is not ever going to be discussed in a pediatrician's office.
Right. That is,
and,
even the
yeah.
most holistic ones.
Yeah. And so, so yeah, I'm here because of my son, and I want to learn how I can interact with him in a way where I'm not kind of like constraining him.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like I want to support his full self-expression and his growth. I don't want to be oppressive or try to fit him into like a box just so that he can fit with society. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely a lot of work with myself because of how I was brought up, and, you know, but how to best do this in a way where I'm not bypassing discipline, because that's also important. And there are certain things that he does need to learn, like he needs to get potty trained, like for example. And so, you know,
let's talk about that today too, because I have some interesting information.
That's like one of my main concerns right now, because I can't take him to childcare without having met that step, but he's not there yet. And so, you know, like my whole life, and I think that's my thing, is like, how can I support him without me sacrificing the workability of my life just because I have a 2-year-old who has special needs?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And one other thing that just came to mind is that a lot of parents will start to get, do you specifically, Jair, do you feel like your energy is speeding up by being around your child?
Like my energy is what?
Do you process things really fast? Like, do you want fast information?
Yeah, I think so. I'm highly sensitive and empathic, big time. And yeah, things just go really fast.
Yeah.
I feel definitely.
The reason
there's something between them.
Because these kids, they don't always appear to be functioning really quickly, but they process information at like light speed.
Mm-hmm.
And they're super, super, super fast inside. And oftentimes they'll get really frustrated because they've already told you what they want you to hear, and you didn't get it after 5 times that they told you, but they didn't tell you in your language.
Yeah.
You just totally missed that they even tried to explain anything to you. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because this thing just popped into my head where a lot of parents will start getting really frustrated. Like the primary parent who is the primary caretaker for the child. Like oftentimes one parent, and oftentimes it's the mom, is like that, you know, person who's really, really into supporting that child and doing all the research and getting all the information and understanding their child. And it's not always both. It sometimes is. But my point is, what happens is often that one person who's that great supporter that's like, driving things into a new direction to support the child, they start functioning really fast inside, and they get frustrated with the other spouse. And I learned that a lot of times it's not actually that they're frustrated with the other spouse, it's because their spouse isn't as speedy as they are. And so they're actually frustrated because they're empathing their child who's functioning so fast. And their child is frustrated that people aren't picking up on things as quickly as they're giving them. And so you start getting frustrated with people, but it's actually you empathing their speed. And you're like, you're not getting it fast enough. You're not moving fast enough. You're not getting it. And it's just so fascinating as a person for any of us adults that are working with a younger child. Or, I've taught this type of class in person before, and I've had adults who are siblings, like one sister was taking care of her, a 30, 40-year-old sister with, on the spectrum. I don't think she had Asperger's. I think she was maybe a little bit more severe on the spectrum. And the point was, like, she would be functioning in it with her sister. And so the people around her who didn't function fast enough to get frustrated because she was empathing the speed of this person who was her sister. And it can happen in a marriage. It can happen, like, if you're working in a clinical setting too. So anyway, I would love to discuss the potty training, because that body awareness for children, especially on the spectrum, is a completely different thing. They do not have the same relationship with their body that we do. And I say we do, but I sort of feel like, me personally, and I just want to share this with you, like, because I have been so immersed in this and worked with so many people who are on the spectrum, young and adult, I feel like I function like it now, because I'm also an empath, a highly sensitive person. By being so immersed in the world of that heightened sensitivity, that empathy, and on the spectrum, I don't just look at them and try to understand it. I feel like I'm being it now. And so I'm saying, like, a lot of what I'm explaining to you guys tonight is also, like, I feel like I'm in it too. You wouldn't know by looking at me, right? But my insides, my nervous system, the way that I process information has become very, very, very different. And so I wonder if any of you who are around people on the spectrum for long periods of time, if that's happened with you too. I'd love to know. Am I or are others like this too?
And one thing I also want to add is, how do I manage myself in the sense that as a highly sensitive person, I short circuit. Like, after a time, I am the primary caretaker. And it's just my mother and I, but she supports me to a certain extent, but I am the person in charge. And when my mom is like, I'm done, it's all on me, even though I'm energetically exhausted. And my room for patience and tolerance and being able to is gone, because I'm just like, I'm about to burst because I'm overloaded with stuff. And so it's harder for me to communicate with him, like you say, and it's obviously it's easier to get frustrated with, we're not understanding each other and you're just throwing a temper tantrum, and I just want to go somewhere and maybe like have a drink. I don't know, like or like, even I've had times
that you can.
I mean, like, I've had times I don't really drink that much, but sometimes I'm like, man, I really could use a drink right now. But I'm shaking, like physically shaking, because I am over the top with how much, like, not right now, but sometimes, like, with my son. And so I've had to do like the whole like breathing exercises just to be able to deal with it. Cause like, I have my son and I'm doing a PhD in science, and I have to do my laundry at some point, like all these things. And then it gets to a point where I don't feel that I'm being effective at dealing with him, because I can't even function myself.
Okay. Thank you for that. So I want to address that. And I actually think that what you just brought up is something that I think everything you just brought up is going to be beneficial and supportive to everybody. That's just how these things work. Like anything that you bring to this is going to be a support to everybody. So please know that there's no stupid questions. I kind of feel like I don't need to say that, but I want to say that to all of you. I love questions. I love when you bring up what's going on. And I really welcome it. So speaking up and talking about what's going on is giving me energetic information to know where to go. So I'm going to address those things. And I just also want to keep the space open for a moment. Does anybody else want to pipe up and say, you know, their relationship, you know, that brought them here? Anything right off the bat? Oh my gosh, we're totally going to go over an hour. I'll try not to, but there's so much to cover. Okay, does anybody else want to pipe up?
Well, my name is Diane. I live in Chicago, and my son is 1.5. He was diagnosed at school when he started pre-K.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a mild autism.
Yeah.
But he was having a hard time like with the speech.
Sure.
Yeah, so I started taking him to speech therapist outside of school and also occupational therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been helping him a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing now that worries me is the diet.
Okay.
He eats really bad.
Yeah.
And he tends to eat the same foods, and I try and introduce him to new foods, but he doesn't want it.
Mm-hmm.
And that frustrates me very much.
Yeah.
I try and like do my breathing exercises like
You too.
Patrick said right now.
That's so funny.
And I've been noticing that he has a very low immune system and he gets sick on that. So I don't know at this point, the therapist, the speech therapist was telling me that, you know, I could try helping him by, for example, we tried a banana. He doesn't like bananas. So I would be taking her bananas and she taught me how to like kind of introduce him to the banana.
Yeah.
And one way is like kissing the banana or putting it in the mouth for a couple seconds. And it did help, but it just, I did it so many times that I just figured out that he didn't like the bananas. So the thing is, I have a tight schedule with my kids, you know, picking them up from school. They have different hours.
Yeah.
So I don't have that time, like, to actually go home, sit down with all my family and eat.
Okay.
Most of the time I eat out. It's just, it's crazy.
Okay. So while we're on food, one of the things you all can look at with food with kids on the spectrum is often it's very texture based. And if you notice that they're really addicted to potato chips, which I hear a lot, it might be because they get so much feedback. They get so much information from that crunch, and they don't get as much information from a banana because it's soft and blah, and they're not getting all of that input that they require. So you want to sort of start to look at like what other crunchy foods, like dry cereal that's maybe like fortified with some healthy stuff, or like, dried fruits and vegetables and things that, you can, whatever. It's not, this isn't so much like me trying to say like what nutritional ways to go, but you really want to start to become aware of if they're only having 3 different things. Like for instance, a lot of times they'll like French fries, chicken nuggets, and like chips, right? Like I see this a lot. And they all have that feedback, that crunch, that texture, a lot of texture for their mouth to receive. And so, if they're really, really requiring a lot of oral soothing, like a lot of popsicles or something like that, then you want to look at, asking them. So this is a big part of what I would really like to get across to everyone, is to start actually asking your child questions regularly throughout the day, because the question is empowering and the conclusion is disempowering. So let's say you're in a situation, either one of you, both of you actually spoke about food. You want to look at, first of all, asking a question that's actually a question. So for all of you, a lot of times we'll say, what do you want for dinner? That actually implies that you're assuming that they are hungry, that they want food. A true question from curiosity would be more like, would you like food? Are you hungry? There's no assumption or judgment in that question, and that's what we want to get to. We really want to start formulating questions to these children who know they have awareness way beyond what we're acknowledging. And I'm not saying you're not acknowledging it. I'm saying we can get so much more awareness from them by asking them questions in a way that's based in curiosity and not in conclusion. So to say, like, that he doesn't like a banana, he might like a banana next week. They move on speed, right? So it's kind of like, all right, so what does your body require? What type of food? What type of nutrition? For all of you out there, one other thing, based on nutritional awareness, I really don't think it's wacky, but I'm just going to say it's really wacky. So hopefully you don't think it's too crazy. But this is like super normal for me. I will actually, this started when I was pregnant. When I was pregnant, I would go into a Whole Foods and I would actually ask my baby, what nutrition do you require from me? And I would pull in all the nutrition from everywhere in the store that the baby required. I would ask the baby, do you require any nutrition? And what do you require? There are so many herbal supplements and organic vegetables, and that's it. You don't have to buy anything. Like, go in there and just suck it all in. You don't need to make the sucking sound I'm making. I'm just sort of like giving you the visual of what I did. This was all in my head, and I wasn't talking out loud to myself. I was just having a telepathic conversation with my baby, who was not yet born. And I was like, what would be supportive of your body and your being? And with my mind, I just imagined like energy pulling through all the food. And I wasn't depleting the food. I was just receiving the gifts from the foods and the supplements and the herbs. And do this with your children. Take them to the grocery store and, to a GNC or, some sort of supplement place or whatever. You don't even have to go in. They're so powerful and potent. You can do it from the car, like 3 miles away. Seriously, really seriously. And just say, does your body require any nutrition that it's not receiving? Probably going to get a yes. And then you say, okay, there's a store down the street called this, which you don't actually need to say, but it might make you feel like it's actually happening if you're saying this in your head to your child. And just say, okay, pull everything you require. And that's it. They probably, before you finish the sentence, already did it. Mm-hmm. And you will actually see that they start shifting and changing in their energy level, and maybe the color of their skin was jaundiced because they're so depleted of certain things, or their iron is low because they're not actually eating real food. They want everything processed or something. From the space that I'm approaching all of you, I don't have a point of view about what diet is the best for all of these children. What I'm aware of is that you need to ask your child. My child was very clear that he wanted to be vegan. Very clear. And he was like, that's it. Now my child's almost 5 and he's never asked for meat, never asked for eggs, never asked for cheese. And my husband's not vegan, so it's around him all the time. So the awareness telepathically that I got while I was pregnant from my child, so I was just asking him, how do you want me to eat? What do you require? Are you getting everything you need? It was so clear that vegan was the way to go for this child. And now that he's out and he's been around for all these years, it's so clear that that message was appropriate. I'm also willing to allow him to have meat if he so chooses. It's like, okay, so at this moment, this is what you're choosing. What are you going to choose next week? And that is about not being in conclusion. That's being in question. So it's like, okay, at this moment right now, this is what you're choosing to eat. Is that working for your body or not? If you get a no, then it's like, okay, what would work for your body? What things can I buy for you? Can I take you to a store, like, and literally shop the aisles with you, and we play hot cold, you know? And like, it can just be like a game where, you know, you're not even really asking them to do it out loud. Like, you can literally go down the aisles and just feel in your body, like I feel really light. I feel really light. And if I keep moving forward, I suddenly feel heavy. And that lightness is an awareness that you're onto something that is supportive of your child. That lightness is the universe responding by, yes, you're in the right place. Like, you might get a lightness in the vegetables and a heaviness in the cookie section. Or maybe your child requires a lot of sugar. And one of the things I've done, and I've seen a lot of people do, is when they get out of the judgment that sugar is bad, their kid has it, they don't have a need to resist against their parents' point of view any longer, and they're over it. They don't want constant sugar anymore because the parent doesn't have the point of view that they need to resist against. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of times these children are facilitators for us in a really big way. And so when you're meeting resistance with your child, you might want to start with, you know, what are they facilitating in me? Like, for instance, when my son was a baby, I was like the biggest germaphobe ever. Like, but I got it from my mom, you know, like, it's familial. I learned to be a germaphobe, like, wash your hands constantly, and, you know, don't let them crawl around in play mats with other kids. Like, it was just crazy. Like, and I literally I felt like my child was going to end up in the hospital if they like touched their mouth after they touched the mat. Yes, it was my first child, and I still only have one right now, but like, I had to get over it. And so of course he's like, I want to touch things, and I just want to be free, and I want to like play in the dirt. And I had to get over it because I realized the more I resisted it, the harder he was going to resist me. And so when I got over my germophobia, he no longer touched things and touched his mouth. He was like, oh, like, there's nothing to like facilitated my mom to become more comfortable with this, so I can let it go. Moving on to something else I'm going to work on with her. So it's something to just become aware of if you're meeting a lot of resistance with something, like even potty training. Like, I'll talk about potty training now, but let's say that there's like a tremendous amount of resistance. You want to sometimes kind of look at, you know, do I have a really big need for this to work? And my child's trying to get me out of the plan that I have. They want to break my plan because they have an idea that there's a different plan, a different daycare, a different school, a different way of doing it, or something. Like, what's the message in this? What's this resistance about? And so I encourage you not to ask your child why questions. Mm-hmm. That is not normal, right? Like, you feel like you want to keep asking your child why questions. A lot of times children on the autism spectrum don't go through that phase of asking why is the sky blue? Why are the ducks doing this? Why? And sometimes we as parents are like, oh my gosh, they missed the developmental phase. But it's because they energetically asked the questions in their head. They got all the information they needed. They didn't need to say it out loud. And we're like waiting for them to ask the question, but they're like, Dad, speech therapist, like, why would I say this out loud? Why would I ask you? Like, I just asked the duck. Like, duck gave me the answer. Like, that's really how they're functioning. And so I'm going to go back to the potty training again in a second, because that's just one angle. I also want to acknowledge that, like I said earlier on this call, that children, their primary language, especially kids on the spectrum, and for those of you who know nothing about children on the spectrum, that's a very kind way of saying it. Instead of calling a child autistic, it's very kind to say a child with autism or a child on the spectrum. Just like a person who is deaf, you would say that they're hearing impaired. You know, there's just like different little things, and they keep changing at the moment. This is the most appropriate kind receivable way to say it. So just, it's a very kind way of saying things. So their first language is energy. So if any of you are working with babies, a cool thing I did when my child was baby, he wanted to be held all the time, like never wanted to be put down, needed input, and needed to be pretty much only with me. Like everybody else, he was like, get the heck away from me. Real honest. He's like, sorry, okay. So what I would do is, let's say he fell asleep in my arms. I knew if I put him down, he was probably going to start crying because he wanted to be held. So I would walk him around and I would ask him questions. I would say, if I put you down now, will you stay asleep? And I get a no. If I put you down now, will you stay asleep? And I got a no. And I kept asking. If I put you down now, will you stay asleep? And I got a yes. I put him down and he would stay asleep. Mm-hmm. So I acknowledged from the earliest moments, because I was doing this work way before I had a kid. So my experience was not all, roses by any means, but like I'm saying, I use these tools right from the very start, and I had a lot more ease and a lot more awareness about the potency that these children have. And I asked the questions. And so please, I feel this energy coming up from so many of you. Don't go back and wish you would have done that. Look at how cool are you? How aware are you? How amazing are you for showing up now? Mm-hmm. This is the time. It wasn't the time then. Now is the time, and you're here. I just got the chills, like head to toe. You guys are amazing. And like I said in the email that I sent you today, I literally was moved to tears when I saw how many people were interested in having this conversation, because these incredible, beautiful children are so misunderstood, and they're so capable, and they have such incredible capacities, and we just don't know it. So I truly just want to open up the possibilities. And I know in the comments here, Leah says, she's really here so that she can learn about what else is possible with the autism spectrum disorder labels, the gifts, what lessons they can bring to us. And I love that. It's so amazing. And truly that's what it's about. Us being in question and giving our children the space to show us what's possible and how they can shift and change things. Now, okay, so when I tell you guys stories, does it help you? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's how I respond well. When I hear people tell stories, that's what really hits home for me, and I remember those afterward. So that's why I tell a lot of stories, so that afterward you can remember sort of, how I approached the lesson or the option. So I was on a plane when my child was really young, and he had been flying really well. I was by myself, and I was flying back from New York with him, and he was like just really unruly, like really out of whack. And I just looked down at him after a while. I didn't immediately think of this, but after a little while, I looked at him and I was like, who are you being right now? Like, this is not my child. Like, what's going on? Yelling and, baby still, 6 months old. And I said, who are you being? Now, mind you, it's not a conclusion. I didn't say, you're not being you. Like, where are you? I just literally was like, who are you being? And a calm came over my child from the question, because it put him in a place where he had to wonder, who am I being? And then I followed up by saying, are you being you or someone else? Mm. Now, I'm, in between people, so this is telepathically, and y'all can do it. And, I know that if it's new to you, you might wonder, exactly structurally, how do I telepathically speak with a child? A lot of it is how do you get up from a chair? You just do. For me to tell you what muscles to use to sit up from a chair, it's making it way too complicated. It's you just do. You just literally think a thought at your child, and they'll give you an awareness, or, the student that you're working with if you're a teacher, or, the client that you're working with if, you're a therapist or something. This applies to everybody. And if you know, you're with an adult who's like acting cray-cray, you know, you say in your head, like, who are you being? Like, I'll say it out loud because I'm totally cool with being weird. I'll say it out loud and I'll say, like, who are you being right now? Like, that's not who I'm used to. Like, are you being someone else right now? And it'll get them to shift. It takes them out of that path of literally being someone else. So what happened with me in that situation was my child gave me the awareness that there was a kid in the back of the plane who was really having a hard time. And he was not just empathing them, he was trying to take it on and process it and help them. And I said, okay, I get that you're doing that. No judgment. It's really tough for me that you're doing that. Is that working for you? He was like, nope, this is awful. And so I said, okay, what would it be like if you were being you? Peace the rest of the trip. Smiles. So this is a conversation you can have with, you know, anyone, right? Like, but it's so monumental when you have this conversation with children on the spectrum because they're like light speed. You ask the question, they get an awareness. Sometimes if you ask out loud and your child is verbal, they'll say, I don't know. Like I have a friend who I'm constantly giving her suggestions of questions to ask her child. And she's like, he just says, I don't know. And I don't know. And he says, I don't know. And nobody knows anything and we're not getting anywhere. She's like, I need you to come over. And I'm like, don't ask them out loud because he's programmed to like look for a structure, like an actual answer. But when you're asking questions, you're not looking for an answer, you're looking for an awareness. Okay, the difference between an answer and an awareness is an awareness has a lot of possibilities. Like, you know, who are you being? Does that work for you? It's like, oh, I could do this or I could do that. It like gives me choices. If I was asking the question like, who are you being? And I'm looking for like, I'm being Joe in the back. Like, it's like pinning them into an answer that if they can't get that answer right away, they shut off and they're like, I don't know. So you want to ask a question from curiosity without the need for the answer because you're really looking for awareness, for energy, for response. And so I just gave you that story just to illustrate that these kids are also so empathic. And Lori sent in a really cool question and she said, you know, what is the difference between an empath and a child or a person on the autism spectrum disorder, and are they the same thing? And truly the answer to that, the awareness is that empaths are, okay, so people on the autism spectrum are all empaths, but empaths are not all on the autism spectrum. Simply put, right? That's it. I've never met a person on the autism spectrum that didn't have awareness 20 feet in all directions. Or I'm sorry, 20 miles, not 20 feet, 20 miles, guys. Like, it used to be not as wide, but now it's really, really wide. So one of the things you also want to recognize is that when you're with these children or adults or a really highly aware person, right? Like, let's say you're with me. Like, I've spent my life working on my awareness. So my awareness is like, I like putting it in the galaxies, right? Like as far out as possible. And I don't want it to be tight. I want it to be like always like that, right? I want to just have awareness in spherical mode. I want to never be looking just at one place. I want to be looking at everything. That's how they always function. If mine starts to get tight and I'm around a person on the autism spectrum, there's a discomfort for them because my energy is so tight. So I've heard in this conversation that we're having tonight that, you know, sometimes you're spent, you're fractured, tired, and I get it. And that's so true. And you're allowed to be, right? You're allowed to be any way that you want to be. And stress can't live in expanded space. Anxiety, depression can't live in expanded space. So if you feel yourself starting to contract in, feeling like your world is closing in, like your options are looking bad, you know, I can't even see what's right in front of me because I'm so overwhelmed, I'm shutting down. Like, that's going to be super uncomfortable for them, but not even to mention them. It's uncomfortable for you. And the first thing you want to do is expand that energy out at least 20 miles in every direction. So you can at least give them a sense of comfort so that they are not trying to pull it out for you by doing things that are actually going to annoy you because of the state you're in instead of being helpful. So if you feel yourself, feel the walls closing in, you're fried, you're fractured, you can't think of anything to do to be helpful at this moment, first thing you do, expand your energy out in all directions, at least 20 miles in every direction. And for those of you who have never expanded your energy out, I have a YouTube video that is like I fully walk you through the process of expanding your energy out if you need that. Some of you might be like, oh, easy peasy, I can just do it. Like, that's it. Like, just, I have to think it, and it is expanded. So back to potty training, something that I think is really, really fascinating about these children is they really do hop out of their bodies a lot. And one of the primary things, how is it 8:50, guys? Time. That's another thing. Being on the spectrum, you have very little awareness of time and space dimensions. You lose, a lot of times I'm still gonna talk about potty training. The timeline of I need to do, so probably the hardest thing for most people is the morning routine, getting out the door, right? Like, that's like so challenging often. And what's required to actually change it is to give them a whole picture. These kids have so much trouble functioning if you give them one step at a time. They will get so frustrated and it won't work. What will work is if you literally, like a movie, you send them the movie of, we're going to get out of bed, we're going to use the potty, we're going to go to the couch, we're going to watch some TV, we're going to change our clothes, we're going to eat breakfast, and then we're going to, walk over to the front door, put our shoes on, put our backpack on, get in the car, go to the school, or get in the bus and go to school, or whatever it is. A lot of times if you're supporting a family that needs help in that morning routine or the bedtime routine or something, you have to send the entire picture. I don't mean the whole day. I mean that, like, beginning to transition, because that whole transitional element, the timeline, the staccato-ness of it, like, okay, we're just going to focus on changing your clothes. We're just going to focus on getting food. You're going to pull your hair out. And if you're not, brilliant. Don't even listen to what I'm saying then. But for other things in life, when it's hard to make a transition, there's a lot of, if you're not familiar with it, core storyboarding is really, really helpful because kids on the autism spectrum think in pictures. They do. I think in pictures too. So it's a little bit easy for me to send pictures or to understand that thought. Now, Temple Grandin, there's a movie, it's called Temple Grandin. Temple Grandin is an incredibly high-functioning, well, I shouldn't say incredibly, she is a high-functioning adult on the spectrum, and she is a forerunner in educating the world about autism spectrum disorder, and she's considered to have Asperger's. And I would love to share so much about her with you, but the thing that I'm going to share with you is just that, if you say to her horse, she will recall, like a Google search. If you put horse in Google, it's going to show you all the pictures of horses. And so she will hear you say horse, and she'll think of all the times and all the pictures that have referenced a horse in her head all at once. So sometimes when you see a child pause, they might be going through that Rolodex of images in their head. And so some of them might be uncomfortable and some of them might be great. And you might want to just sort of help them understand, this is what I'm talking to you about, and show them a picture. And sometimes before you go to a location, show them a picture. This is where we're going, because sometimes they don't want to get in the car to go to that thing. And you have to sort of show them, this is where we're going. Is this desirable for you? And if it's not, it's somewhere I really want to go. How can we make this work so that we can go? What kind of compromise can we come to an agreement on so that we can do this because it would make me really happy, and I know you don't really want to do it. So where can we go after that would really make you happy? So there's a lot of compromise that's really possible. You just have to recognize that in order for you to have ease and not like a tantrum, there's a lot of sort of little extra things you need to recognize about how they function, and a lot of like, I need to show them the whole picture of we're actually going to come home afterward, because you might have thought that you're going to leave and never come back. You know, like truly, that's a possibility. So with potty training, a lot of times they don't connect with their body very well. Like they're literally still integrating into their body. And so the energetic body, the being of these children is often the most uncomfortable time is 1 to 3 years old. And, you know, any of you who have met a child who is in that 1 to 3 year old period, life is often, maybe not always, but it's uncomfortable. And their body is overstimulated, uncomfortable. It's hard to be in it. And sometimes when they're unregulated, when they're bouncing off the walls, literally, like they might be bouncing into the wall to get input to help them feel their body so that they can get back into it because they can't feel it. So you actually want to ask them, hey, where is your body? Where is your being? Right before the toilet. So that they get connected with that physicality for a moment and say, okay, do you feel the pee-pee in your body? You know, like, hey, can we get it out? Like, really, like these conversations need to happen. You think like, oh, you feel it and then you want to go. But no, they might not actually connect those feelings with their body. They might think they're hungry. Like the wires can get very disconnected. So you really want to look at, where's your body? Mm-hmm. And then ask them to touch it. Like, it's right here. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, okay, great. So can you feel if your bladder is full? And they might say yes or no, but you want to like have this conversation like you would. Obviously, I'm doing kind of a kid voice, right? Like I have kids, so I do that. But like sort of like you would with a person who is fully verbal and fully capable, even though it might not seem like they are. So have that full-on conversation, like an adult conversation, you know, with your gentle voice, but maybe more than you think that they can receive. And ask yourself, how can I say this in a way that they can receive it? I do that with my husband. I want him to do something for me, and I say, how can I say this in a way he can receive it so I can get what I want? It works with everyone, right? Tips and tricks for life. Oh, man. The body thing. I was bringing my son to a play date with a child who hits and punches, you know, and one time he kicked my kid in the head. And I was like, I took a whole year off from seeing this kid because I was like, I don't want to be near this. Like, that's ridiculous, you know? But the thing is, like, that child was out of his body. He had not an awareness of where his body was, and he was thrashing and lashing out for his own reasons. And at the moment, I was so, like, angry that he was doing something to my child that I didn't really look at the full situation. So I finally said yes to a play date. And before we got to the play date, I pulled over and I said to my child, I was like, okay, I want to ask you a question. Now, a lot of this is like, I'll say it, I don't always require a response. Like, I'm just asking, and the awareness might not even be verbal. So I had this conversation with my son. I was like, okay, we're going to go have this play date with this child. What do you know? Do you know if he's in his body or out today? And he was like, he's out. And I was like, okay, cool. So are you in your body or are you out of your body? And he was like, I'm in my body. And I was like, okay, so what can we do right now to help this other kid get in his body? Mm-hmm. And like, my kid was like, simple. Like, I'm just going to go teleport over there and tell him or ask him, where's your body? Like, don't, discount that that's possible. That's possible. Like, these kids can bilocate. Like, tonight I'm at my parents' house, like, because some of you said, like, I can't be near my children when I'm doing a call like this, they'll keep tapping in. And that happens to me too. My child's like, wow, that looks really fun. I like that energy. I want to be there. And that happened to me a lot, especially when he was younger. He, like, every time I got on the phone, he would literally be so quiet, and then he would just get crazy. And I'm like, like, I can't have any phone calls. And then I realized he enjoyed the energy of the contribution, and I was leaving him out. I didn't mean to. So finally I got aware enough. I started asking questions like, what is this? How can we change this? You know, like, and I get a lot of these questions from Access Consciousness. I do need to give a shout out to Access Consciousness. I did get a lot of training from that modality. And so, you know, I started asking him, would you like to play a part in my business? He was like, yes. I'm like, awesome. Would you like to contribute to this phone call? So what happened was he'd start to like sit on my lap for the first few moments of the phone call silently. And then he was like over it. Remember how I said earlier in the call, it's like if they don't have something to resist against anymore, they're like over it. They were just trying to facilitate you into like letting go of your points of view, your barriers, and your conclusions. I was like, phone calls need to be professional and like not noise in the background, and I need to, you know, have total silence. I mean, you know, I have a whole bunch of wackadoodle points of view I had, right? And so they're gone now. So I let him really be a part of things. Like tonight, I came over here to my parents' house to do the call, and I was like, hey, would you like to be a part of the call? Not physically, but do you want to energetically join me? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, cool. So like he'll show up and contribute in his own way. So I allow him to be a part of it. And now, like when I leave, he'll be like, okay, bye. But before it was like awful when I left. So when I included him in my world, when I invited him in my world, when I acknowledged that he had something to contribute and I allowed it and received it, everything changed. So really, really cool things that these kids are capable of. I mean, one other thing I wanted to say about kids on the spectrum is that they're not left brain or right brain, they're whole brain. And so they don't compartmentalize or structure their thoughts and their beliefs and their way that they view things like we do. And so I think I used to be very right brain, creative, outside of the box thinker, and like numbers and, you know, techie stuff was like not even an option for me. But there's something about the worlds that I've immersed myself in, which you guys are immersing yourself in, where I'm now whole brain. I can code websites. I never thought that was possible. Like, not in the realm of possibilities, I thought. But like when you are not stopping yourself or stopping your children from anything being possible, you think this is how I function, this is how I am, but what if it's not? Like, what if there's a lot more possible for you? What if the frustrations you have with your child, the lack of patience, like, what if that's you being someone else? Or what if that's what you think you should be? Or what if that's the old patterning and the reference point that you have from the people that you've surrounded yourself with, or you literally just because of your life path and where you were raised, that's who's been around you. I mean, one of the biggest things these kids do is they increase our patience, for sure. I mean, I've seen so many people open up their capacity for patience, and what is that? That's allowance. And so really what you want to look at is when you're getting short, when you're getting frustrated fast, first, who am I being? If I was really being me, would this bother me? Do I really want to be someone else right now, or do I want to be me? Frustration was something that someone brought up earlier. Frustration is always a lack of information. Frustration is like, you want to start asking yourself, what information do I require here? Who or what has that information that I require? How quickly can I get it? So it might be reaching out to someone, it might be looking at the internet, it might be asking your child a question, right? So frustration, don't stop there. Ask a question. Let's say that they're not eating, and you look at that and you're like, what's this about? Is your stomach okay? Did you see someone eating this and it made them throw up? What is it about this situation that I'm not aware of? What can you share with me? And again, this doesn't have to be verbal. This can be you asking questions out loud and then the awareness is received by you. And maybe you don't get what you received right away, but eventually you will. So if there's, problems, situations, challenges, ask it questions. What's going on here that I'm not yet aware of? What have I not acknowledged? How can I be more in allowance of this situation so I can figure out how to make it, work to our advantage? Does that make sense, everybody?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So one of the things I do with my son is he doesn't listen. He still doesn't talk. He's learning like Latin words and those, but I can't like verbally communicate with him yet.
Yeah.
And so when I take him out, he spends a lot of the time in the house, and I wish I could take him out more.
Mm-hmm.
But when I take him out, if I let go of his hand for a millisecond, he will run in any direction, which is obviously not safe.
Super typical.
So,
right?
yeah, so I have to keep him with like a harness all the time, but it is very constraining for him because I can't run like he does. I mean, I probably should, but the thing is, so when I try to take him out, like I get all stressed out because he's running in every direction. Then he wants to grab everything that's in the ground, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
And to a certain degree, I'm germophobic, but to another degree, it's like, well, I don't want you grabbing like cigarette butts and gum and like all these things that you just shouldn't, dirt is dirt, but everything else that's in there, or like, red ants, that's not a good idea, or something along those lines. Like we have scorpions here too, and so so it's like, I'm concerned about your safety. I'm not trying to like like
the concept of safety. That's like a really weird reality that we live in, and that's really hard for them to understand oftentimes. I'm saying a couple like blanket statements like but so what you want to do is I've seen a lot of kids do really well with social stories. Visual social stories, like picture after picture after picture of what you expect. Like if you see like, so you said he's 2, right?
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure if that's the time for it yet. It might be like 2.5, 3 when that starts. I'm not totally sure. Anybody on this call know when those social stories begin? I guess maybe anytime. It's visual input.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's 2 and 8 months.
Oh, okay. So it might be good now, but as I'm saying this out loud, I'm thinking something else might be more appropriate for you. What you want to do is you want to have a conversation again. First, before I even say about the conversation, first I want to acknowledge, I'd like to ask you, truth. Mm-hmm. Is it actually true that he's not listening?
I think he understands, but he chooses not to do what I ask.
Understanding and obeying and doing what you ask are totally different than listening.
Right.
Is he actually?
I think he does understand and doesn't obey.
Yeah, that's fair. That's totally possible. Yeah. But I do think that there is a very broad sweeping thing I hear from people that they don't hear us because they're not looking at us. Mm-hmm. And what I have seen time and time again is a lot of these children are super kinesthetic. So they need to have something in their hand to process what they're hearing.
Okay.
And so they might literally have so much trouble looking at you and hearing you that we want to sort of recognize, is it actually a kindness to my child to not say, listen, look at me? Because it's actually making them do it in a way that works for you. Mm-hmm. Like, what if they could better hear you if they weren't looking at you and they were touching something? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've seen this a lot. So it's something to just acknowledge, or just to, maybe not acknowledge, but to kind of play with. Like, one other thing I've seen is that one of the things you want to sort of stay away from is you want to stay away from saying, focus. Okay, a lot of parents do this. A lot of parents will say, focus on me. I'm talking to you, right? And so it seems harmless, but the thing that you're doing is, like I had said earlier, these children have spherical awareness. So you're asking them to cut off all their awareness and only look at you. Okay? So the alternative is to say, I recognize that you are aware of the bumblebee out the window and the tiniest little, elements of what's going on in the fluttering of wings, and you know how many carpet hairs there are. And I acknowledge that the light is bright in your eyes and there's a lot of stuff going on. And can we have a conversation at the same time, please? I also would really like it if you could receive what I'm saying. So it's like, I acknowledge that you're really, really aware, and can you also be here with me? And this allows kids to want to show up and communicate and talk and listen, because they're like, whoa, I don't have to cut off my awareness? Cool. Like, because as much as we say multitasking is like not possible, they will always. They are super multitaskers, and that's okay. And the more we say that they can't, the more they're going to try to prove to us that they can. So yeah, he's probably listening, and it's like, well, just approach it a different way and see if things change. And when he doesn't do what you asked him to do, basically you want to look at him, and or you don't have to look at him, but I usually do, like, look at the child and say, so the way that I communicated that to you didn't work. I'm trying to get you to stay by my side and not run, and then send the picture. How can we better say that in words or with my energy so that that's what we do? Like, what do you need from me so that I know? Like, it might be like the child says, I need way more intensity from you, or I'm not going to take you seriously. Like, you've got to, like, get intense. Or, like, you're too intense and I shut down and I can't hear what you're saying because it's more than I can process at the moment. The other thing is touching objects on the ground. Is, again, it's information. So it's like I'm touching all the rocks and all the dirt because it's input. It's energetic information. And it's like, have you ever heard of, like, I think it's called psychokinesis, where you can, like, feel and know the past, present, and future of an object. Like, they get, like, all of that from touching stuff. Like, they get so much information. Sometimes when kids, rock, or they're flicking their fingers, it's because they're getting such an abundance of information that they're trying to focus their energy on one thing to shut out how much information they're receiving. So again, I would love for you to look at possibly not stop them from stimming, because this is like stimming, right? I do stimming things like, drinking coffee, or, but just like things, we can all think of different things. They just look different. They're more like acceptable behaviors. And what you want to do is you want to look at, like, how can I allow him to do the stim, or show him a different way of doing the stim so that it's more acceptable, not as obvious, and he's still, or she's still, or this person, really gets what they require of focusing their energy to shut out stuff. Like, maybe they need the sound canceling earphones or something like that. But you just really want to look at, like, how can I approach this in a different way so that it works for them? How can they speak their language? What are they requiring from me at the moment that I can facilitate for them so that we can get what I need? Because it is like, you need him to be safe. And it's scary. And so it's like, how can we communicate so that we can get this end result that I'm looking for? What do you require so that this happens? And whatever works right now, a lot of kids on the spectrum, it won't be what works in a month. Sorry, they're going to keep you on your toes.
It's an evolutionary process.
Yeah, it's really, so I've already kept you over. I would really like to, I'm going to open up anyone who's muted in case you feel like you can't. Well, I think some of you purposely muted because you probably have background noise. Does anyone want to speak up, say anything? I can stay on a little longer. I would so love to hear from anybody else who wants to ask a question, share anything. The floor is yours. Background noise. That's because I am muted. Okay. Shy peeps. Cool. Oh my gosh, I have such a list of things that I really wanted to chat about. Can I go like 5 more minutes? Is everybody cool with that?
Yeah.
Just jump off if you have to. But there's just like just a couple of quick things that I think could really be a contribution to you based on the energy that you guys have brought here. Thank you. Love you guys. What's happening a lot with these children is, and adults and empaths, is you are being taught by those around you that your awareness is a feeling. And so what happens is we say, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling mad. I'm feeling dumb. I'm feeling whatever. And what happens is, by the laws of the universe, when you state that, whether it's in your head or whether it's, out loud, if you say, I'm feeling blank, you, by the laws of the universe, have to process that emotion through your body and figure out how to handle it and how to process it out and be done with it. And that can take a long time, and 99% of the time, it's not even yours. So why process all this stuff through your body when it's not even yours, right? So the way to pivot, because that's what I would really love to share with you, is ways to pivot so that you can see things coming and shift so that you can have a smoother path instead of it being like, I'm constantly dealing with issues. I'm constantly reacting to challenges, okay? So the pivot is you want to start recognizing, I am perceiving overwhelm. Overwhelm, right, is an abundance of information all around you, right? There's always overwhelm all around us. There's always information everywhere. There's information just, when we're in a crowded place with lots of loud people, that's information overload, overstimulation for these kids is they're not making it up. This is not just in their head, but you can help them. Now, I don't care if they're in your womb or if they're 80 years old. This is something that's really helpful to them. You want to share with them, instead of feeling it like it's yours every time you become aware of information. There's 20 people over here who are depressed and smiling, but I'm feeling depressed because I'm empathing them, right? As soon as I say I feel depressed, I have to process it through my body. Instead, you want to say, I'm perceiving a lot of depression. I'm perceiving a lot of sadness. What do I want to do with this? Do I want to process it myself, or do I want to acknowledge that the people or the energy of the space around me is a lower frequency than I'd like to function from? And just that slight shift of I'm perceiving, which is external, versus feeling, which is internal. Does this make sense, guys?
Yeah.
Do you see how monumental that one tool could be in changing your life and in your child's life? And I'm saying, like, babies, teach them immediately or wherever they are right now. Share this with people. Allow the awareness not to become a feeling unless it's yours. And most of the time, it's not even yours. I went to a conference a couple months ago, and I left. It was a business conference. It was like an entrepreneur's business conference. I left feeling like I wanted to quit my business. And I was like, I don't know if this is working. I've shared this on another telecall. Some of you may have already heard this. But it was really weird because I'm really passionate about my business. And I love my business. I love what I do. I love being of service to all of you. I love it. And I came away from a training. Instead of feeling lit up with excitement, I left feeling like, I'm not sure if this is for me. I think I might be done. I think I might close up shop. And I was like, does this belong to me? Am I being me? And I was like, nope. Whew. I am perceiving that I picked up a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't mine, and it really feels like me. And I went into feelings, so then I had to process it. And what do you know? That was like, 5 months ago, that person who led that business workshop just closed her business last week. And I was inside her head. I didn't even mean to. She wasn't acting like she didn't like her business. She was acting like she loved it. But she just came out with all the information about how she was like, I felt empty. I wasn't enjoying it. I had to close it down. And I was like, oh my gosh, empath. Like, so if your parent, you know, if you are a parent, a social worker, a caretaker, any of those things, and you have heavy stuff going on, immense frustration, feelings, immense overwhelm, I can't do this, I don't know what to do, any of those things playing in your head, what if it was your neighbor? Like, what if it was someone else? Like, what if it didn't have to belong to you? What if you started perceiving that stuff instead of feeling it and allowing yourself to recognize that you've got this and you're amazing and they chose you? And by the way, even if you aren't the parent of these children that you're fascinated with, they still chose you because you're in their lives. Even if you just sort of know them, they chose to bring you in. So I am amazed by all of you. I'm so grateful that you showed up. I'm so grateful that you're interested. I'm so grateful that you're curious. I'm glad that you allowed me to share some of these wacky stories and that you didn't laugh me off stage, that you stuck with me. Thank you so much. Does anybody want to say anything before I finish up?
Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
Here, thank you. You're very amazing.
Aw.
Open. I don't know. I just really appreciate you. And like you said, for some reason, we're here, and I needed to hear all this. You know, I was aware of a couple of things, but sometimes I need to be reminded.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And isn't it interesting how the questions that other people ask actually hit home for you? Did you notice that? When you come together like this in an energy type of call like this for people who are interested in an energy perspective, there's always that commonality that everybody's here because we all have similar interests and similar situations, similar curiosities. So even the people who are listening to the replay, they're going to say, oh man, that's exactly what I needed to hear. So thank you for asking those questions and being brave.
So Ashley, this is Leah.
Leah! Hi!
Oh, my camera doesn't work, but what else is new?
That's okay.
Anyway, I've been in and out, as I mentioned.
You told me.
Multitasking. Not my forte. So anyway, I just wanted to thank you for bringing this to us, what I did get to hear and what I'm going to hear when I get to re-listen to the whole thing. I'm very excited to just be in possession of this information so that I can look at them more realistically, so that perhaps I can better relate to a niece or a nephew or, you know, the neighbor's kid, whatever.
Yes.
As well as the work I do in helping people as a personal coach, you know, maybe bring some new ideas for them, their lives.
Absolutely.
If they've been struggling with autism spectrum themselves, or if they know someone. So I just really appreciate you sharing all this groundbreaking information.
Yes, and please, you know, please feel free to take these things that I'm sharing with you and implement them into your business, implement them into your home life, implement them into your relationships. I'm glad that you brought that up because we're all here on this call, on this, you know, for a different reason. We all have sort of a different purpose out there. And I want you to know that I support you in using this information to go out there and change the world, because I think so many of you have a calling like I do to make an impact. So I hope that I can be, you know, of service to you to be having a bigger impact in the world. So thank you for being here and doing that.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that too. I was going to ask you if you were sharing this information.
Utilize it. Absolutely. And I also would suggest that you listen to this video or audio, whatever version you're listening to, minimum of 3 times, because you're going to hear something different every time, for sure. Yeah. And so I do that too. With classes I take and things, I listen to it multiple times and I get something fresh and new every time. And it's because you open up your capacity to receive more every time you go through it. And I'm sure you're not surprised. There's a lot of energetic stuff going on that's not seen and not obvious, you know. And these kids are here working with us right now, even though it's not obvious. They're here, you know, kind of like lifting up this call, this, you know, video to really help us get to the point and get to the information that will really help them so that we can all have more ease in our lives.
I just have one more quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a reason why this is how they're coming through? I mean, is there like a reason behind these symptoms of this spectrum?
I'm trying to
Like
think.
we see them as a condition, but like energetically speaking or spiritually speaking, like this group of kids or people or souls are coming in, and it's becoming increasingly more abundant in the population. And so is there like a specific reason behind this?
So yes, they are here to create a different future. That's like the simplest answer. And then just to go a little bit deeper into it, these children literally, measurably have a different nervous system. They have a different energy field. A lot of them have never been on Earth before. And if they have, it hasn't been for like 100 years or much longer, actually, not 100. Like I think I interviewed Susie Miller, and I'm putting that interview out on my podcast really soon. So go look for that. And she founded Awesomeism, and she helps children to integrate their spirit into their being, or their being into their body, their spirit into their body. And some don't fully integrate. It's too uncomfortable because it's such a dense body for such a high vibrational light being that sometimes when your child is first born and they're really, this is my non-technical term, uncomfortable, out of body, constant upset, everything is overstimulating, life, breathing, the world, touch, everything is just too much. That's because they are maybe starting to integrate or maybe haven't at all yet. And so everything is so disconnected that the input is just tremendously too much. So from what I've learned and from what I've experienced, the being, though sometimes it takes 3 years, sometimes it takes a lifetime, sometimes it happens within the first 6 months. If you have a child and you don't feel connected to your child, oftentimes it's because their being hasn't entered their body yet. Isn't it interesting? And so you're like, this body, this baby, I should be so connected, but it's like their being isn't in it yet. Why is it showing up like this? It's because we're at a time on the planet where the beings can be much more high vibrational and can bring in the capacity to shift our consciousness into a much higher level. And so we have a for this space. And so it's very uncomfortable for such a no density light being to be in such a dense body. And so their higher frequency, higher capacity, higher changeability, like they look at you when something shifts within you, you know, their eyes, their soul is just shifting and unlocking you just by being present with them. And it is the time within the evolution of our world that has opened up the capacity for them to be here. So why is it so challenging for them in these bodies? Why is it presenting itself that way? Is because they're these light beings, more light than ever before, trying to integrate into these dense physical bodies, and it's really darn uncomfortable. And that's sort of, I think, what you're getting at, sort of like, why is it so uncomfortable? Why are they choosing that?
Yeah.
And some truly choose to not fully integrate into their body and never fully bring their being into their physicality. And so that's a choice they make, and it's just too uncomfortable, too unbearable. They don't think they can make it through that. And so, you know, that's something that, you know, usually that would mean that they're completely nonverbal. Sometimes it's, you know, very wheelchair bound, not super functional. But in their brain, if you were speaking, not brain, in their energy, if you're speaking with them telepathically, they are at light speed. Yeah. They are amazing. They are changing things, unlocking things. They are creating friends, you know, down the street, and you just don't know all this is happening. So their capacities are there no matter how integrated they are, but the integration process of the being into the body is super uncomfortable. And they're higher frequency light beings than ever before. And it's cool seeing so many more come in because it's unlocking all of us.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't give you a light answer there, huh?
No, but that's exactly what I was asking, so I appreciate it.
Cool, good, good. I'm so glad. All right, I adore all of you. I'm so, so, so grateful that you all are here. And please, please, please give me feedback. Let me know what you thought. Any further follow-up questions, if you want more, let me know. You know, mull it over, sleep on it, and then I would love to hear from you. That'd be such a gift to me to hear, you know, what's going on and how it shifted your worlds. I would love that. So, mwah, I adore all of you. Thank you for being leaders and forerunners in this. You guys are amazing. And with that, I will stop this recording, and you can look for an email from me soon with the mwah. You guys are amazing.
Bye. Thank you for your wisdom.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.